Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about a standing straddle pose, sometimes called a pyramid pose or Prasarita Padottanasana. So the pose, depending on what method of yoga you're doing, is taught in a variety of ways. Some ways it's taught with very short legs, and other ways it's taught with a wider stance. I always learned it as about a 3 to 3.5 foot stance, and it is a good stretch for both your hip joints and your muscles. And it also is a stretch for the spine. So the thing is, if you are tight in your hamstrings, you're much more likely to, I'll show from the side, have like a rounded back, right? So a couple things, using blocks, if you have them, is helpful for that, or the fingertips. The fingertips are like partial blocks just built into the body. Can be a little hard on the tips of the finger joints if you're arthritic there. The knuckles, not quite as high as the fingertips, but it is higher than flat palm. So knuckles, a little easier on the fingertips, and it's also easy on the wrists. So that's a way to get more of a flat back. And unless you have someone watching you, it's hard to tell. You can feel with your hand. If you feel sort of the stegosaurus back, then you know you need to lift up a little bit more. Or you can work with a mirror or your phone in mirror mode. So it's good to learn what that flat back form feels like, and eventually you won't have to check, you'll just know that it's there, right? So it's a pose primarily for the lower body, but we are aiming to lengthen the spine as well. Incidentally, having the legs, we should show from the other side, having the legs wider apart does make it easier to have a flat back. If your leg muscles are not quite ready for this, and or you're going to transition up to standing to do a standing pose, like often we do, then wide can be problematic. However, there are certain benefits to having the legs wider. You're going to stretch a little bit more in your inner leg muscles and the hip joints. It'll be easier to have a flat back, and eventually you go all the way down into sort of a flat pancake position with the legs very wide. So shorter distance makes it a little harder to lengthen the spine, and it puts more into the hamstrings. So if your focus is having a challenge in terms of your hamstrings and having a flat back, then doing a variation where you hold your ankles and have a shorter distance, and you're really focusing on lifting your hips and tailbone and flattening your low back, then the outcome of the pose becomes different. So what I'm trying to get at is that the wider versus moderate versus short are not necessarily correct or incorrect. They just have different outcomes. So you need to understand what outcome you're aiming for, and or what outcome your teacher is aiming for. If your teacher has an outcome they're trying to impart to the class, and you know your body needs a different outcome, then that's a good thing to communicate either before or after class with the teacher. Or if they come up to you and you say, oh, you know, my back hurts if I do it like this, so I need to do it that way, then that's a good time to do as well. But yeah, that type of communication is very helpful. So like any pose that stretches the hamstrings, a little bit of a bend in the knees is very helpful. Fingertips, blocks can be very helpful. And just doing the pose repeatedly is also really good to feel very comfortable in the pose, or at least feel very stable, right? So when we do newer poses, or if we're going deeper in a pose we're familiar with, there's not always the sense of comfort, but we do want to feel that the body is safe and primarily stable. So focus on your breathing, the feeling that your muscles are being challenged but not ripped, and that your joints are healthy. If you have those sensations, then you're probably doing the pose correctly. Anyhow, thank you so much for checking in. If you like this content, please leave a positive comment, subscribe, and also consider checking the description below and joining my monthly membership for workshops, long forms, and lifestyle and artistic advice as well. Thank you again, and look forward to the next time. Ciao, everyone.